I have the honor of A, seeing you, and B, giving you a little bit of an overview of where the MVNO market is at the moment and where it's going. Maybe a little bit of history of how we got here as well. Who was at the MVNO World in Brussels this year in June? Okay, that's very good. The reason why I asked this is because it was only 4 months ago. So for those who've already seen some of this content, apologies. In 4 months, we had many launches, but the market dynamic and the broader market is similar to what it was at the end of June. But let me get into it. I guess there are two key points I'd like to make. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Dario Tanesio. I work for Omdia. Going back, Omdia is a sister company to the event organizer. What we do research. We research the wider technology ecosystem from cybersecurity, AI, all the way to telecoms, including the MVNO market. Now, why do we bother researching the MVNO market? In my view, because it's cool, because there's a lot of innovation coming from the MVNO market, more than there is from the traditional MNO market in some cases, but also because it's an important business development area for companies like yourself, MVNEs and enablers within the roaming space as well for MNOs, but also, all in all, is a 3% roughly of the entirety of the mobile market globally, but in some markets, such as the UK, is a lot more than 3%. We are talking about double-digit slice of the market here and in many European markets. Incredibly important market. So I want to talk a little bit about the trends and where we are and where we're going, but also I want to mention kind of a new concept that we started introducing last year, because we are running out of definition in the MVNO market. So a new concept that we brought in last year was the idea of a neo-telco. Now we get there in a minute, but what does neo-telco mean? In some cases, or in some circles, or in some markets, the MVNO as a label is a bit stale, and in some market is also a little bit damaged by what happened in the past. So neo-telco seems to be something that is more receptive from an MNO point of view. Not every MNO globally is receptive of the MVNO business model. And we need to educate them about what MVNOs bring to them, rather than seeing the usual dichotomy that we see in many places. So I promised a little bit of an overview of where the MVNO market is and where it was and how we got here, and the various segments that contributed creating this immense MVNO market. And yes, just like James, I was much younger when I started, but we need to remember like the building blocks that keep adding to the size or to the overall pie of the MVNO market. How did it start? It started with pretty much discount and the so-called ethnic segment, and those are still around. So the MVNOs that focus on providing value prices or targeting niche communities, which back then we used to call the ethnic market. I'm not sure it's a word that goes on really well these days, but this is how the market used to be called, the ethnic market, meaning specific groups from their origins. Then it came the international, so companies looking at creating a proposition, MVNOs, for the traveling market, travel segment. And if you think about it, it took almost 15 years, and now the travel mobility segment is booming thanks to eSIM. But it started long time ago, mainly with multi-MC. It was not an easy journey for multi-MC, but now things have changed a lot, both in the multi-MC market as well as eSIM. Then we went into a mobile data. This is it coincided the launch of 4G, where mobile data became affordable. James mentioned earlier on, capacity was there, extra capacity was there, how to fill in the network. So those are the days of expansion of MVNOs into the data market. And then again, it came the digital first. Now, the MVNO market was the first market to really start addressing that digital first opportunity. Only 5 years-ish ago, telecom operators started transitioning everything they do onto an app. But the MVNO market, it was there already 10 years before. This is why and we are saying sometimes the trends that we see in the MVNO market are at least 5 years ahead of the MNO. Because they're nimble, because thanks to many of you guys providing really compelling platforms for MVNOs, and the ability to really get to market very quickly and risk more compared to what large telecom operators can afford to do. But then we saw the IoT segment, the enterprise, which is still in the majority of cases addressing the SME, and then eventually came the sub-brands and the neo-telcos. Sub-brands, we're talking about the Smarties of this world, and the Otello, if you're in Germany, of this world. And the neo-telco. Neo-telco it's a difficult concept to kind of define, but think about an MNO, an MVNO or a brand that is entirely digital, digital by nature, not transition to digital, and eventually a brand that is entirely managed by a marketing team with no engineers. Sorry if you're an engineer working for an MVNO, but the idea is that we need to get to a position where MVNOs can be run by people who do not know technology and focus on differentiating, selling, acquiring, and retaining their customers. That's the neo-telco idea. And finally, the travel mobility. This year, the 2024 was an absolute boom for travel mobility. It really fostered growth for the international market and the MVNOs alike. Some of those resellers of travel mobility are not MVNOs themselves, but they rely on brands such as yourself, enabling their end-to-end services without them really touching much. So, why is it good news for the MVNO market? The MVNO market, as you all know, have gone through phases of growth and decline, consolidation, acquisitions. We have seen consolidation, acquisition, MNOs buying MVNOs from the US all the way to Australia, in Europe, and Latin America, pretty much everywhere. So that 5 years ago, this picture would have been a bit depressing, to be honest. But now the MVNO market is starting to grow again. There is that natural kind of 10-15% of the market that by nature wants to be an MVNO or a sub-brand customer. In markets where regulation is light and supportive, that's what we tend to see. But in most key markets, the MVNO market is growing again, which is a very, very positive news. We haven't seen that everywhere. And one of the enabling factors, as I mentioned earlier on, is eSIM. Think about the beauty of eSIM from an MVNO point of view. For those of you who have been in the MVNO market for long enough, you'll remember that one of the issues that you had is that you could only address low-end or value customers because these handsets were not in the hands of your traditional customer base. But now these handsets have a free eSIM slot that you can address. This is really allowing you to get into a higher end portion of the market and try new things. Try before you buy. We have seen a lot of MVNOs offering SIM card. Try it 1 week free. Do you like it? Eventually you swap. Or do you want to use it as secondary? Fine. Do you want to use it for traveling? Fine. But the reality is that eSIM has opened an opportunity for challengers, and MVNOs are by nature challenging companies, and they are thriving on it. Mainly travel mobility. The number of devices supporting eSIM is huge, by the way. By the end of this year, we'll have a billion devices being sold supporting eSIM. The reality is that most eSIMs in devices are not used unless they're used by A, MVNOs, B, travel mobility. It's only a recent, very recent change from an MNO point of view to start selling using eSIM. MVNOs are still very much plastic. And on that plastic point, the interesting reasoning about why MVNOs and eSIM go hand to hand and do so well together is because airlines are selling it, travel aggregators are selling it. Those that are specialists in traveling are getting into the eSIM market. This is the former Alitalia, not the best way of selling eSIM, to be honest. Actually, it's pretty crap, but don't quote me on that. Because I tried to buy it and don't do it. I've done it, so you don't have to do it. But, and apologies if any of you is supporting them. But it's definitely not integrated in the app. You have to go outside their own app, which is actually quite a fantastic app. But they haven't got to that integration yet. But one of the reasons why eSIM for travel is so good is because it's sold to people that really need it. It's sold to tourists when they purchase their flights, to tourists when they purchase their car insurance, or when they rent their car. It's the moment, it's that customer moment that those of you who are in marketing know only too well. And if you look at where we are in the travel market, most customers are still switching off their phone or switching off data when they're roaming. This is actually, I slightly disagree with those data points because I believe that the Wi-Fi segment is much, much higher. But I didn't produce this stat, I only grabbed it from Deloitte, so if it's wrong, apologies on their behalf. But we can definitely refine those numbers. But this is exactly what's happening. Now, moving on, where are we going with the MVNO market? The MVNO market is growing in many, many areas, and the business development opportunities for MVNOs are still there and are multiple. The beauty of this slide is not only because I produced it, it's because I produced it a few years ago with dummy logos. I said, I think this is a good opportunity for this company to enter the MVNO market. And little by little, they are actually populating the slide as a real company that is now an MVNO. Look at the fintech market. Apart from Monzo, which is still speculative, and I know they are actively looking into it, all the other fintech have actually launched eSIM specifically for travel. And in the travel, I have Airbnb and Expedia. Those are speculative, but the other airlines are real. They have launched eSIM. So that is, and by the way, whoever gets to Airbnb or Expedia or Booking.com is probably going to win the jackpot, because that is exactly where eSIM for travel needs to be sold, in our view. But anyhow, you will notice that there is a segment missing. I'll ask you the question, which segment is missing in here? But we've gone from big tech. We know from the MVNO world that Uber was there. They detailed their plan to launch an MVNO. It's impressive for both enterprises and consumer. Then we know utilities in the UK here, BT supporting utility warehouse, a great example, I use it all the time, but there's more utility around the world launching MVNOs. Enterprise picking up, mainly for SMEs or some IoT, but definitely picking up. Alternative fixed line operators and cable operators is the no-brainer segment. Every alternative cable operator should have a converged proposition. Which one is the missing segment here? Correct. So I've seen the co-op somewhere earlier on. Is there someone from the call? This is, apologies if I don't have the retail here, but it's so obvious that it's no longer a kind of a new-ish business development opportunity, but it's definitely the largest segment in the market. Now, I talked about neo-telco earlier on. What is a neo-telco? It's a digital business. It's a digital native business. It's not a business that is transitioning into digital. This is a sub-brand specifically, and it's an example of what a sub-brand could look like. It's actually part of the VEON group. But it's the beauty of operating an entirely digital telecom business is that it is, to an extent, easier to address the adjacent digital segments, which in this case are in the entertainment market. And it certainly represents an opportunity. Now, in this case, they claim that they have more users of the app for digital services than users of the app for telecom services. But the app was introduced as a telco app, and now it's taking off on the entertainment side. So the two businesses or multiple lines of businesses are reinforcing and propelling each other in a, think about the super app type of approach. That's what they're trying to achieve on a smaller scale. Similar to that, I mentioned already the fintech segment. I really like the Revolut use case because it's so neat. They're really addressing the market segment that they know. The whole, I don't know if any of you is using Revolut card, but essentially the entirety of their positioning is people who travel. Because in their perks, they offer access to the lounge, exchange rates and things like that. Better exchange rates when you use your card abroad. So the most obvious one for them to add was travel mobility, and they did. And we don't have numbers from there yet. I guess we'll get an update very soon. But I can keep hearing people who are promoting and using the Revolut travel app. Unlike the example from the Italian airlines I used earlier on, this is fully integrated into their own application, which is a great user experience, and that's pretty much a piece of advice if you need to do it. With that said, there is a lot happening in the MVNO market. Later on, we'll have a panel discussion about what's happening in the UK, which is a really interesting one. But all in all, when we look at markets globally, existing markets have gone back into growth mode, and plus there are a few additional markets. We have Nigeria has just opened this year, huge opportunity, and we have a few additional markets in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, and Latin America that are opening up to MVNO. So good prospect, not an easy one, but a good prospect for the market. With that said, thank you very much.
Do we have any questions for Dario? We have time, so if you have a question, stick your hand up and we'll get a microphone over to you. I think someone that did the app for Air Italia, they'd like to ask you a question, Dario. Anyone got any questions?
I used it earlier in the summer, and I would say I hope they have improved the user experience a little bit.
Hi, good morning. I'm Rajesh from Nevada.
All right.
One of the questions for the tourist eSIM market, do you think the MNOs eventually will wake up and drop their international rates, because that market exists only because the MNOs are not in it or don't want to drop their profits?
Drop their rates with the rates they give you, or the rates they give
roaming rates. I mean, the existence of tourist eSIM is only because of the arbitrage available, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Well, it depends who you talk to within the MNO. From the retail point of view, something which is actually supported by wholesale, many MNOs are now introducing their own eSIM. There are several examples. destroyed them. Vodafone has launched an eSIM for the US travelers coming into Europe. They only sell it over there. But if you are a US citizen and look around for eSIM, you probably come across one of the Vodafone ones. So they are acting at retail level because it's too big and too fast growing as an opportunity to not take it. At the same time, there is an expectation that as the pressure on the retail side builds up, there will also be a little bit of pressure on wholesale. But it really depends on your destination markets, in my view. Some markets will remain pretty similar to what they are today, and some of the markets will in some of the markets you probably enjoy a little bit more commercial power simply because the eSIM is taking off so much and so well. I think all in all, dual approach from MNOs. But the other aspect I would say is that the beauty of eSIM for now is that it's beneficial for everybody. Many of those eSIM customers are silent roamers anyway. So the MNO is quite happy to receive those inbound local SIM cards. For those customers that traditionally are not silent roamers, this is where it starts becoming a commercial discussion that is moving into your favor as a buyer.
Thank you. I think it was the gent behind Rajesh as well.
Hi, I'm Tommy O'Donnell from MVNOs Global. Given that there's a lot of non-telcos taking advantage of eSIMs, do you think that MNOs and MVNOs are doing enough to basically take advantage of these opportunities, given that they have, I guess, a lot of advantages compared to, your airline only knows that or Italian Airlines only knows that you're traveling when you buy a ticket, Revolut only knows that you're traveling when you exchange money, but your phone provider knows pretty much exactly where you are in the world at all times.
They do, but in my view, they get to know it when it's too late. Because if you are planning a trip, a long haul and long trip, let's say more than a week, the best place for anybody to sell you a travel SIM card is not when you start roaming or when the signaling tells your mobile operators that you have landed in a country, but is when you start your trip. That customer moment is way before the MNOs knows that you're traveling. So in my view, the companies that have a privileged position to be there are not telecom companies, are the travel aggregators, are the airlines, are the insurance companies, are the car rental companies, all of those that connect with you when you start planning your trip. Then, can the MNO add to it? Absolutely. But if you look at it from the buyer point of view, I don't think the telecom operators are the best companies in this segment. Sorry, telcos.
Thank you. We've got time for one more. If there's anyone else, yeah, please, we're here.
Hi, I'm Robert Schwartz from OpenSignal. I wanted to ask a question about the thing that you mentioned earlier, that some MNOs were taking over MVNOs. Mint Mobile is one of the examples. So what would be the benefit for MNO to take over MVNOs, like in the case of Mint Mobile? And also, what are the prospects of retaining the customer base? Because I assume that one of the reasons why MNOs would be interested in taking over MVNOs would be getting access to the customer base, but these people already moved away from MNOs. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of MVNOs popping up in the market. So what's stopping potential customers from moving over to the new ones, to the new MVNOs?
I mean, if you look at the acquisition, and there are some really good data points out there. Let's take a look at the Spanish market. If you look at the numbering, so how the regulator is giving the numbers, the emphasis to those requiring it. Most of the companies requiring or acquiring numbers are MVNOs. Because MVNOs are so focused on customer acquisition, in fact, it's one of the minor problem of the MVNO market that is so focused on acquisition and a lot less focused on retention, but that's another story. So MVNOs are fantastic acquisition machines. For MNOs to do acquisition is considerably more expensive. So one of the rationale for MNOs, going back into your question, why do an MNO buy an MVNO? There could be hundreds of reasons. But one of such is the fact that MVNOs are more effective in doing acquisition at a cheaper cost compared to what MNOs tend to do. And when an MNO acquires an MVNO, they're acquiring market share. Quite simple. They're growing, and it's a consolidation move. In some cases, it's a small consolidation move, and in some cases, a huge consolidation move. But then the motive can be different. Why do they make an acquisition? Was the MVNO struggling because they couldn't pay their bills, essentially, that happened, or it still happens? Was a desire from the management of the MVNO to exit the market. Some people have made a lot of money in the MVNO market by selling back to their MVNO. Look at Mint in the US. That's pretty nice, I would say, if you own that company. So there are multiple reasons, but it's part of the dynamic of acquiring and retaining customer base. I hope I understood your question.
Yeah, so. Yes.
Thank you very much. We now have to move on to the next presenter. So thank you very much, Dario.